Somewhere around 37 BCE, a silver tetradrachm rolled off a mint ou, probably in Antioch, ou, and into history. On the front ou, the obverse ou, a woman with a sharp nose, a strong jaw, a royal diadem, and a pearl necklace. The inscription reads, Bas ik ka io epia ia new tepa au. Queen Cleopatra, goddess the younger. On the back, the reverse, is Mark Antony, bareheaded, the most powerful Roman general alive. Here is the thing nobody tells you in movies. Cleopatra's portrait is on the front. She is the issuing authority. She is the one calling herself a goddess. She is the one setting the terms. That tiny silver disc, no bigger than a poker chip, tells you more about who Cleopatra actually was than anything Elizabeth Taylor ever did on screen. She was not a woman who was acted upon by history. She was a woman who minted herself into it. And today, we're going to talk about exactly how she did that, and why Rome spent decades trying to undo it. To understand what made Cleopatra VII genuinely radical, you have to understand the dynasty she was born into. The Ptolemies had ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries by the time she came along, since 305 BCE, when Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals, carved out Egypt for himself after Alexander's death. For all that time, the Ptolemies spoke Greek and governed as Hellenistic Greek monarchs. They flatly refused to learn the native Egyptian tongue. Think about what that means for a moment. The Pharaoh, the figure that Egyptian theology said was the living son of the gods, the bridge between heaven and earth, could not speak to his own subjects without a translator. For 250 years, the Egyptian people had been ruled by foreigners who couldn't even be bothered to say good morning in their language. Then Cleopatra VII came to the throne in 51 BCE, at 18 years old, and changed that. She learned Egyptian. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler known to have done so. And according to the ancient historian Plutarch, she didn't stop there. Writing in his Life of Mark Antony, Plutarch says she could converse with Ethiopians, troglodytes, Hebrews, Arabians, Syrians, Medes, and Parthians, without an interpreter. Historians today are legitimately skeptical of the full list. Some scholars note that the diplomatic language of the Hellenistic world was already Greek, So why bother with Parthian? Others suggest she needed to negotiate with foreign ambassadors in private, away from ears that understood Greek. The honest answer is, we don't know exactly how many languages she spoke or how fluently, but here's what we do know. The story of her polyglottism was famous enough that people were still repeating it 100 years after her death. Whatever the precise count, her linguistic talents were real enough and striking enough to survive her. And learning Egyptian wasn't just a hobby. It was a political statement that none of her ancestors had been willing to make. Language was only the beginning. Cleopatra understood something that most rulers in history have not. The population you govern does not just want competent administration. They want to believe in you. And in ancient Egypt, belief was inseparable from the gods. So she became one. Specifically, she presented herself as the living embodiment of Isis, O, goddess of magic, motherhood, wisdom, and resurrection. This was not unique to Cleopatra among Ptolemaic queens, but she took it further and more deliberately than anyone before her. Public ceremonies, temple dedications, and royal imagery all reinforced this identity. Temple walls showed her making offerings to the gods, dressed not as a Greek queen, but as an Egyptian pharaoh. She wore the headdress. She used the hieroglyphs. Coins minted during her reign depicted her with the symbols of Isis. And critically, Isis was not just any goddess. Isis was the protector of the dead, the devoted mother, the magical healer, Eo figures of comfort and power that resonated with ordinary Egyptians in a way that abstract Greek royal authority never could. By blending Greek royal legitimacy with Egyptian divine symbolism, Cleopatra became something her predecessors never managed to be: a unifying figure. To Egyptians, she was the divine pharaoh, continuing ancient sacred traditions. To her Greek subjects in Alexandria, she was the enlightened Hellenistic ruler. She was running what we would today call a multi-layered communication strategy AU. And she was doing it in 50 BCE. Now, here's where historians genuinely disagree on emphasis. Some scholars frame this primarily as cynical political theater, sophisticated, effective, but ultimately a performance. Others argue it reflects something more integrated, that Cleopatra genuinely operated within both cultural systems, not merely performing them. The Getty's published scholarship on Ptolemaic queens notes that she was not afraid to break with existing traditions when necessary. She even chose not to be buried in the Sema, the traditional tomb of Ptolemaic rulers, which was a significant break from dynastic precedent. That's not the behavior of someone just going through the motions. Let's talk about the moment everyone knows, but almost nobody frames correctly. 48 BCE, Cleopatra has been forced into exile by her younger brother Ptolemy XIII and his court advisors, who essentially staged a palace coup against her. She is about 21 years old. She has no army capable of retaking Alexandria, and Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in the known world, has just arrived in Egypt, chasing his defeated rival, Pompey. According to tradition, Cleopatra had herself smuggled into Caesar's quarters, rolled inside a carpet, or possibly a linen sack. The ancient sources vary on the details. What everyone agrees on is the outcome. She met Caesar alone. She charmed him, and he backed her claim to the throne. Popular culture frames this as seduction, full stop. But let's look at what she actually walked away with. Caesar's military support drove out Ptolemy XIII. She was restored to the throne. She secured the most powerful Roman in the world as both a personal ally and the father, probably of her son Caesarion, though Caesar never publicly acknowledged paternity and historians still debate it. Later, after Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, she aligned with Mark Antony, the next dominant force in Roman politics. To her Roman contemporaries and to much of history since, these alliances were proof of a seductress at work. But consider the alternative reading. Every major military and political power around Egypt was Roman, or soon would be. The Ptolemaic kingdom was already financially dependent on Rome. Kingdoms to the east were falling. Cleopatra's foreign policy, at its core, was a sustained attempt to keep Egypt sovereign by making herself indispensable to whoever held Rome's power. That is not seduction as a substitute for strategy. That is strategy using every tool available, including personal relationships, because in the ancient world, personal relationships were politics. Here is the part of the story that historians have spent decades trying to untangle. When Cleopatra's alliance with Mark Antony collapsed at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE a naval defeat so complete that their combined fleet simply turned and fled. Cohort Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, found himself holding the keys to the entire Mediterranean world. And he had a problem. Cleopatra was not just a defeated enemy, she was a legitimate ruler, a mother of Caesar's possible son, a woman who had the devotion of an entire kingdom and styled herself a living goddess. Alive and in Rome, she would be a political liability. Dead, she was a trophy. But the story didn't end with her death in August of 30 BCE. It continued as a propaganda project. Octavian who renamed himself Augustus, is said by some scholars to have actively instructed historians to discredit her, to reframe the decade of Roman civil conflict as the story of a Roman general who had been bewitched by a foreign temptress. The Roman poet Horace called her fatal monstrum, a deadly monster. Virgil coded her as a threat to proper Roman order. The Roman historical sources that describe her in detail were written by men living under Roman rule, decades or even a century after her death, including Plutarch, whose biography of Antony is one of our richest sources. As Plutarch himself noted, writing about 150 years after the fact, Cleopatra had a beauty that was not altogether incomparable, and he considered her real power to be in her intellect and her voice, not her face. That quiet admission from a Roman-era source is remarkable. He's essentially walking back the seductress myth. In the same breath, he's perpetuating it. The result is that almost everything we know about Cleopatra is filtered through a lens that was specifically designed to diminish her. The Library of Alexandria, which held contemporary accounts of her reign, was destroyed multiple times, actually taking direct evidence with it. Her own writings, which Galen later studied and cited for medicinal knowledge, are gone. We are left with coins, temple reliefs, and hostile witnesses. Since we can't trust the written sources uncritically, let's talk about what we can actually verify. The coins minted during a reign are produced by that reign, their primary sources, and hundreds of Cleopatra's coins survive. They show a woman with a prominent nose, a strong jaw, a long neck, a face that is unmistakably individual and purposefully not idealized in the smooth Greek style. That's significant. Hellenistic coins routinely made rulers look ethereally beautiful. Cleopatra's coins show a real face. Some scholars argue this was a deliberate choice, projecting authority and seriousness over conventional beauty. She was a master at crafting her image, and her currency was an extension of how she portrayed herself, not only to the Egyptian populace, but to foreign lands. Recent archaeology adds a tantalizing layer. In late 2024, excavations at the Temple of Taposiris Magna near Alexandria uncovered 337 coins bearing her portrait, buried beneath a temple wall. Some archaeologists believe her tomb may be nearby. Others are skeptical, and the disagreement is genuine. The coins bear her portrait, but scholars not affiliated with the dig disagree that her burial is at the site. Her tomb has never been found. Meanwhile, a marble bust found at the site was claimed by some to represent Cleopatra, though some Egyptologists dispute this, arguing the face doesn't match her known portraits. This is not a closed case. Cleopatra's physical appearance, her actual ethnicity, her mother's identity is unknown, and her grandmother's on one side is disputed, and the location of her tomb are all live historical debates. Anyone who tells you these questions are settled is selling you something. Cleopatra VII ruled Egypt for 21 years, from 51 to 30 BCE. She kept a small, structurally weak, economically strained kingdom independent against the most aggressive imperial power in the ancient world for 2 full decades. She did it by speaking her subjects' language, literally, when no ruler of her dynasty had bothered to do so in 250 years. She did it by building a religious and visual identity so coherent that her coins, her temples, and her public persona all told the same story. She was Egypt, she was divine, she was legitimate. She did it by forming alliances with the 2 most powerful Romans of her era, and by using those alliances to extract real territorial and political concessions, not just personal favors. And when she finally lost, she died on her own terms. The ancient sources say she was bitten by an asp, a symbol of Egyptian royalty. By the way, though some modern scholars, including a few referenced by Britannica, have suggested she may have been murdered by Octavian. Even her death is contested. What's not contested is what happened next. Octavian declared the first day of his rule to be the day of her death. He made her the villain of the story. He succeeded so completely that for 2,000 years, the dominant image of Cleopatra has been a beautiful temptress in a Hollywood costume. Dwayne Roller, in his biography based solely on primary sources, argues that she was above all a learned and visionary ruler whose overarching goal was the preservation of her dynasty and her kingdom, not the romantic figure Rome made her out to be. That's not a romantic heroine, that's a head of state. The tragedy isn't that she lost. States lose wars. The tragedy is that when she lost, Rome didn't just take her kingdom, they took her story. And we've been sorting through the wreckage of that theft ever since.